Welcome, dear travelers of the night, to Mystic Bedtime Stories. I'm your guide on this journey through time, and tonight we're embarking on something truly extraordinary. As you settle into your bed, perhaps adjusting your pillow just so, take a moment to feel the weight of your body sinking into comfort. Feel your breathing naturally slow as we prepare to drift back through the centuries together. Tonight, we're traveling to an island where mystery still walks the ancient pathways, where the Mediterranean holds secrets older than Rome itself. We're going to Sardinia, that jewel of an island floating in waters so blue they seem to hold pieces of the sky itself. But we're not visiting modern Sardinia, no. Tonight, we're stepping back 3,000 years, into a world where bronze gleamed in workshop fires, where stone towers pierced the landscape like fingers reaching toward the heavens, and where a remarkable people built a civilization so enduring that its monuments still stand sentinel across the island today. Close your eyes now, if you haven't already, and let your mind's eye begin to see. Picture yourself standing on a Mediterranean cliff as the last light of day paints the sky in shades of amber and rose. Below you, waves that have washed these shores for millennia continue their eternal rhythm. Behind you, rising from hills carpeted in wild herbs that fill the evening air with their fragrance, stand towers of stone so perfectly fitted that not even a blade of grass could slip between their blocks. These are the Nuraghe, and they are our gateway into one of history's most fascinating and mysterious civilizations. 7,000 of these ancient structures still dot the Sardinian landscape, silent witnesses to a people whose story has waited centuries to be fully told. Tonight, that story unfolds like a gentle dream, carrying you deeper into rest with each revelation, each whispered secret of the past. The Nuragic people, as scholars have named them after their magnificent stone towers, flourished from around 1800 BCE to 800 BCE. For 1,000 years, they created a society so sophisticated, so connected to the greater Mediterranean world, that their bronze figurines have been found in Etruscan tombs on the Italian mainland, and Mycenaean pottery rests in their own ancient homes. Yet for all their worldly connections, they remained distinctly themselves, creating art and architecture unlike anything else in the ancient world. But who were they really? This is the question that has captivated archaeologists, historians, and dreamers for generations. Were they warriors, as their bronze figurines suggest, standing proud with horned helmets and shields raised? Were they peaceful farmers and herders, tending their flocks beneath the Mediterranean sun? Were they master seafarers, navigating by stars that still shine above us tonight? Perhaps, as you'll discover in our journey, they were all of these things and more. As we begin this story together, let yourself sink deeper into your comfortable refuge from the busy world. Feel your shoulders relax, your jaw unclench, your breath deepen naturally. The Sardinian night is warm, but not too warm, with just enough breeze to stir the ancient olive trees whose ancestors may have shaded Nuragic shepherds. In the distance, you might hear the soft bleating of sheep, the distant splash of a night fisherman's net, or perhaps just the profound silence that comes when the modern world falls away and only the eternal rhythms remain. Our story tonight spans 1,000 years and more, but time moves differently in dreams and in the realm of ancient memory. We'll witness the birth of a civilization in the bronze workshops where copper and tin first fused into tools stronger than stone. We'll climb the spiral staircases of the great towers, feeling the cool touch of precisely cut stones that have stood firm against earthquake and storm. We'll sit by fires where craftsmen shaped the small bronze figures that would become their civilization's most haunting legacy, those enigmatic warriors and women, animals and boats that seem to capture something essential about the human spirit. We'll sail with Nuragic merchants across waters that knew no national boundaries, only the ancient paths between island and mainland, between one people and another. We'll stand in sacred places where they honored forces greater than themselves, in springs that still bubble with the same clear water their priests once blessed. And as civilizations rose and fell around them, as Phoenicians established their trading posts and Romans marched their legions across the known world, we'll see how the Nuragic people adapted, endured, and finally transformed into legend. But perhaps, most importantly, we'll discover what they have to teach us still. For in their stone towers and bronze figures, in their reverence for the natural world, and their genius for bringing communities together, they left us a kind of wisdom that transcends the centuries. It's the wisdom of people who knew how to build things that last, who understood that true strength comes not from conquest, but from harmony with the land that sustains us. Their civilization eventually faded, as all civilizations do, blending into the larger currents of Mediterranean history. But they left us something precious: the understanding that human communities can flourish for 1,000 years when they find the right balance between innovation and tradition, between reaching outward to the world and staying rooted in the sacred places of home. So tonight, as modern Sardinia sleeps under the same stars that guided ancient navigators, as the Nuraghe stand in silhouette against the moon-silvered landscape, we begin our journey back to their time. Let their story carry you gently toward your own dreams, where perhaps you too will walk the ancient pathways, hear the bronze smith's hammer ringing across the hills, and feel the timeless connection between past and present that makes us all part of one great human story. Are you ready to begin? Take one more deep breath, let your body settle completely into rest, and join me as we step through the veils of time to discover the entire story of the Nuragic civilization. Our first chapter begins in the shadows of prehistory, in a Sardinia before the Great Towers, before the Bronze Age revolutionized human possibility, in a time when the island was already ancient beyond our easy imagining. The story begins now, in the whispers of ancient Sardinia, where every stone holds memory, and every breeze carries echoes of the past. Let us drift back now, back beyond the Bronze Age, beyond even the first glimmers of metalworking that would transform the world. We're traveling to a time when Sardinia was already ancient, when the Mediterranean was younger, and the island itself was taking shape in ways that would echo through all the millennia to come. Picture yourself standing on this same island 5,000 years ago, in the time that scholars call the Neolithic. The morning mist is lifting from valleys that seem almost untouched by human hands, yet if you know where to look, you'll find signs that people have been shaping this landscape for centuries already. Feel the cool morning air against your skin. Breathe in the wild herbs that grow everywhere, and listen to the profound silence that comes when the world has fewer than 1 million souls scattered across its entire surface. This is the world of the Ozieri culture, the people who came before the Nuragic civilization, who laid foundations that would endure long after their own names were forgotten. They flourished between 4000 BC and 3000 BC, busy with agriculture, sheep farming, and something far more mysterious that still captures our imagination today. Walk with me now along ancient pathways worn smooth by bare feet and the hooves of sheep. The sun is warming the earth, and you notice something extraordinary. Here, carved into the living rock itself, are doorways that seem almost too small for adult humans, but these aren't doorways for the living. These are domus de Janus, which means fairy houses in the local language, chambers that were carved into rock by hand over 5,000 years ago. There are around 2,000 of these rock-carved burial tombs scattered across the island, ranging in date from 4,400 to 2,300 BC. Step closer to one of these ancient tombs, and you begin to understand something profound about the people who made them. The chambers were carved to resemble homes, sometimes in extraordinary detail down to the beams, wainscoting, hearths, jambs, and false doors. These weren't simple burial places. They were houses for the dead, created with the same care and attention that the living gave to their own dwellings. Imagine kneeling at the entrance to one of these fairy houses, as locals still call them today. The opening is just large enough for you to crawl through, but once inside, the space opens into a complex of rooms that might have taken months or even years to carve from the solid rock. The walls were often decorated, painted with red ochre, and carved or etched with symbols whose meanings we can only guess at now. Run your fingers along these ancient carvings, feeling the tool marks left by hands that turned to dust before the pyramids were built. Here's a spiral that might represent the cycle of seasons or the journey of the soul. There's a series of parallel lines that could be a tally of days or years, or perhaps something far more mystical. The red ochre paint, made from iron-rich earth, still glows faintly in the half-light filtering through the entrance, as vivid as the day it was applied thousands of years ago. The Ozieri people who created these monuments lived in a world that was simultaneously simpler and more mysterious than ours. They knew every plant and animal on their island home, understood the subtle signs that told them when to plant and when to harvest, when the fish would run, and when the storms would come. They worked with stone tools that required incredible patience and skill, shaping not just their burial places, but their entire landscape with a gentleness that modern minds can barely comprehend. Their villages were clusters of round stone huts, built with the same careful attention to harmony with the natural world that characterized everything they touched. They kept sheep and cattle, grew wheat and barley, and probably knew secrets of working with plants that we've since forgotten. But perhaps most remarkably, they developed one of the earliest metalworking traditions in the Western Mediterranean. In 2014, early Chalcolithic period Sardinia was identified as one of the earliest silver extraction centers in the world. This took place during the 4th millennium BC. Think about what this means. While most of Europe was still locked in the Stone Age, the ancestors of the Nuragic people were already learning to coax silver from rock to understand the mysteries of fire and metal that would eventually revolutionize human civilization. But they did more than just work metal. Remains from this period include hundreds of menhirs, called perdas fitas and dolmens, standing stones that marked sacred places and probably served as astronomical calendars as well. Picture these massive stones being erected under star-filled skies. Ceremonies conducted in languages that have vanished entirely from human memory, people gathering to mark the turning of seasons and the passage of years in ways that connected them directly to the great cycles of earth and heaven. The transition from the Ozieri culture to what would become the Nuragic Civilization wasn't sudden or violent. Instead, it was like watching one dream slowly transform into another. New techniques for working bronze began to spread across the Mediterranean, probably carried by traders and craftsmen who moved from island to mainland and back again, sharing knowledge and techniques that would eventually transform the entire known world. The people of this pre-Nuragic Sardinia were already accomplished seafarers, already connected to trade networks that stretched from Spain to the eastern Mediterranean. They understood that their island was not isolated, but was instead a crucial stepping stone between worlds, a place where different cultures could meet and exchange not just goods, but ideas, techniques, and dreams of what human communities might become. As you rest now in this ancient landscape, feeling the warmth of sun-heated stone beneath you and breathing air that carries the same wild scents that perfumed the dreams of people 5 millennia ago, you begin to understand that the Nuragic Civilization didn't arise from nothing. It grew from roots that ran deep into Sardinian soil, from a tradition of careful craftsmanship and reverence for both the living and the dead that had already been flourishing for centuries. The Ozieri people and their successors created more than just monuments and tools. They created a way of being in the world that honored both innovation and tradition, that understood that true progress comes not from abandoning the past, but from building upon it with wisdom and care. Their fairy houses still dot the landscape today, gentle reminders that humans have always known how to create beauty, even in the face of death, how to make even our most solemn ceremonies into expressions of love and continuity. As the centuries passed and bronze working techniques spread across their island home, these foundations would prove strong enough to support something unprecedented, the flowering of the Nuragic civilization itself. But that transformation was still to come. For now, let yourself drift deeper into the peaceful world of ancient Sardinia, where every stone was placed with intention, every tool was crafted with care, and every tomb was built as a doorway between the world of the living and the eternal mysteries that lie beyond. The fairy houses stand silent in the Mediterranean moonlight, keeping their ancient secrets, waiting patiently for the next chapter of human story to unfold upon this blessed island. And that next chapter, the birth of the Nuragic age itself, begins to stir in bronze-scented workshops, where fire and metal would soon give birth to wonders that still astound us today. Breathe deeply now, and let your mind drift forward through the centuries. The Sardinian sun is climbing higher in an azure sky, and the scent of wild rosemary mingles with something entirely new. The sharp, metallic smell of copper being heated over carefully tended fires. We've moved forward nearly 2,000 years to around 1800 BCE, and you're witnessing one of history's most remarkable transformations. This is the moment when the ancient traditions of Sardinia began to fuse with revolutionary new technologies from across the Mediterranean. Feel yourself standing at the threshold between worlds, between the age of stone and the age of bronze, between the quiet settlements of the past and the magnificent civilization that was about to flower across this island like wildflowers after spring rain. The people around you are the inheritors of the Bonanaro culture, the final evolution of the ancient Beaker peoples who had lived on Sardinia for centuries. But they are also something entirely new. New peoples had been arriving from the mainland, particularly from northern Italy, bringing with them fresh ideas about religion, technology, and community life that would blend seamlessly with the island's ancient wisdom. Watch as a craftsman carefully measures copper and tin into a clay crucible. The proportions must be exact, roughly 9 parts copper to 1 part tin, to create bronze, that revolutionary alloy that would give its name to an entire age of human history. The tin itself is precious beyond measure, for Sardinia has copper in abundance, but tin must be traded from far distant lands, perhaps even from the mysterious islands that traders call Britannia, thousands of miles to the north. The fire in the workshop glows white-hot, fed by charcoal, and carefully controlled drafts of air. When the metals reach the perfect temperature, they merge in a moment of alchemical magic, copper and tin becoming something stronger and more beautiful than either could be alone. This is more than metallurgy. This is the birth of a new kind of human possibility. Listen to the rhythmic hammering as the cooled bronze is shaped into tools that would have been impossible to imagine just generations before. Here, a farmer's axe that will clear forest faster and more efficiently than any stone tool. There, a warrior's sword with an edge sharp enough to slice through leather and strong enough to turn aside enemy blades. And everywhere, the small personal ornaments that speak of a people who understood that beauty and utility could be one and the same. But bronze brought more than just superior tools. It brought the need for trade networks that would eventually span the known world. Sardinian merchants were already venturing forth in boats that could handle the open Mediterranean, carrying their island's copper to distant shores and returning with tin, amber, silver, and ideas that would transform their homeland. The Nuragic people were never isolated. They were, from their very beginning, citizens of a much larger world. It was during this pivotal period that the first proto-Nuraghes appeared across the landscape. These weren't yet the towering structures that would define the civilization, but rather platform-like buildings with corridors and staircases that allowed access to terraced tops. They were experimental, architectural visions being worked out in stone by communities that were just beginning to understand what they might accomplish together. Picture yourself climbing the stone steps of one of these early structures. Your hands find purchase on blocks that fit together with remarkable precision. And as you reach the flat terrace at the top, you can see for miles across the Sardinian countryside. Below you, the landscape is dotted with small settlements, each centered around its communal workshop where the miracle of bronze making is performed daily. Smoke rises from fires that never quite go out, for the work of transformation never stops. The communities that built these early Nuraghes were organized around principles that would endure for centuries. They valued collective effort over individual glory, understanding that the great works they were creating could only be accomplished when many hands worked toward a common vision. Yet they also celebrated individual skill, as evidenced by the extraordinary craftsmanship visible in every bronze tool and ornament they created. Their religious life was evolving too, influenced by the new peoples who had joined their island communities and by the expanding worldview that came with increased trade and contact with other cultures. Sacred springs and natural grottos continued to be honored as they had been for millennia. But now they were also creating new kinds of sacred spaces, places where communities could gather to honor the forces that governed their increasingly complex world. The Bonanaro culture, which represents the first stage of true Nuragic civilization, also gave birth to another distinctive monument type, the giants' graves, megalithic burial structures that combined the ancient reverence for the dead with new architectural techniques. These covered gallery tombs were built from massive stones fitted together with the same precision that characterized all Nuragic construction, creating spaces that were both tombs and temples, places where the living could commune with their ancestors and seek guidance from the wisdom of ages past. Imagine walking among these monuments in the gathering dusk, hearing the evening breeze whisper through the carefully placed stones. The giants' graves weren't just burial places. They were statements about the nature of community and continuity, declarations that the bonds between generations were stronger than death itself. They represented a people's commitment to honoring their past while building confidently toward their future. The Bronze Age transformation that was sweeping across Sardinia wasn't happening in isolation. Similar changes were occurring throughout the Mediterranean world as communities everywhere discovered the power of this new alloy and the trade networks needed to sustain its production. But nowhere did the Bronze Age flowering occur quite as it did on Sardinia, where ancient wisdom and revolutionary innovation combined to create something entirely unique. As the centuries of the early Nuragic period unfolded, the experimental proto-Nuraghes gradually evolved into the magnificent towers that would become the civilization's most distinctive legacy. Communities grew larger and more prosperous, sustained by agricultural abundance and enriched by trade relationships that stretched from Spain to the eastern Mediterranean. The island was becoming a crucial stepping stone between worlds, a place where different peoples and cultures could meet, exchange goods and ideas, and collectively push the boundaries of what human societies could achieve. The transformation was gradual, but inexorable, like watching a tree grow from seedling to magnificent maturity. Each generation built upon the achievements of those who came before, adding their own innovations and insights to a cultural legacy that was becoming richer and more complex with each passing year. By the time the classical Nuragic period began to emerge, around 1600 BCE, the foundations had been laid for one of the ancient world's most remarkable civilizations. As you rest now in this ancient landscape, feeling the warmth of Bronze Age prosperity in the very stones beneath you, you can sense the tremendous creative energy that was building across the island. The Sardinians had discovered not just how to work bronze, but how to create communities that could sustain complex projects over generations, how to balance innovation with tradition, and how to remain rooted in their island home while reaching out to embrace the wider world. The stage was set for the great flowering that was to come, when the experimental towers of the Proto-Nuragic period would evolve into the magnificent Nuraghes that still dot the landscape today. But that magnificent architecture and the sophisticated society that created it grows from the solid Bronze Age foundations we've explored tonight. Sleep now and dream of fire-lit workshops where metal and imagination fused into possibilities that would endure for millennia. As morning mist lifts from the Sardinian hills, revealing the landscape in all its ancient glory, you find yourself standing before one of humanity's most enigmatic architectural achievements. Rising from the earth like a giant's chess piece carved from living stone, a Nuraghe towers above you, its massive blocks fitted together with such precision that not even a blade of grass could find purchase between them. Take a moment to truly see this marvel that stands before you. The Nuraghe is a truncated conical stone tower, and more than 7,000 of these Bronze Age structures are scattered across Sardinia, each one a testament to the extraordinary vision and skill of the people who built them over the course of 1,000 years. The word itself means hollow pile of stones, but such a simple description barely captures the majesty of what you're witnessing. This particular tower represents the flowering of architectural genius that began with those experimental proto-Nuraghes we encountered in the previous chapter. The typical Nuraghe has the outer shape of a truncated conical tower, resembling a medieval tower, with a tholos-like vault inside. But as you walk closer, running your hands along stones that have weathered 3 millennia of Mediterranean storms, you begin to understand that you're not just looking at a building, you're witnessing a revolution in human engineering. The construction technique is breathtaking in its sophisticated simplicity. The structure's walls consist of 3 components: an outer layer tilted inwards and made of many layers of stones whose size diminishes with increasing height. The massive blocks at the base, some weighing several tons, were quarried from local stone and moved into place using techniques that archaeologists are still debating. No mortar binds these stones together. They rely entirely on precise fitting and the architectural wisdom of the master builders who understood how to make stone flow upward like frozen music. Step through the narrow entrance, ducking slightly as you pass under the massive lintel stone, and you enter a world that few modern humans have experienced. Inside, the walls curve inward as they rise, creating the distinctive beehive or tholos dome that gives these structures their internal strength. The acoustics are remarkable. Whisper at one side of the chamber, and your voice carries clearly to the opposite wall, as if the ancient architects understood secrets of sound that we're only now rediscovering. A narrow stone staircase, built into the thickness of the wall itself, spirals upward in the darkness. Follow it carefully, your fingers tracing the smooth stones worn by countless hands over the centuries, and you emerge onto the terrace at the top of the tower. From here, the view stretches for miles across the Sardinian countryside, and you begin to understand one of the Nuraghe's most important functions: communication and control of the surrounding territory. The Nuraghe were primarily built to defend the surrounding territory, and for this reason, they can mainly be found either in strategic positions, such as at the top of a hill, an upland, or they were located in such a way that they dominated a gulf or a coast. From this elevated position, you can see other Nuraghes dotting the landscape, each positioned to communicate with its neighbors through fire signals or reflected light. Together, they formed a network of watchtowers that could relay messages across the entire island faster than any messenger could travel. But as you stand here in the Mediterranean breeze, breathing air perfumed with wild herbs and sea salt, you realize that these towers served functions far beyond mere defense or communication. The function of the Nuraghe itself is a matter of continuing scholarly debate. Some theories hold that the Nuraghe were defensive structures, others that they represented cultural status symbols. The truth, like so many truths about the ancient world, is probably more complex and more beautiful than any single explanation can capture. Some Nuraghes were simple, solitary towers rising from the landscape like stone poems dedicated to the sky, but others evolved into architectural complexes of stunning sophistication. Later examples evolved to feature up to 6 towers, polylobates, and a central tower called the mastio, which could reach almost 30 meters in height. These complex Nuraghes were architectural cities in miniature, complete with courtyards, secondary chambers, and defensive walls that enclosed entire communities. The most spectacular example of these complex structures is Nuragic at Barumini, a settlement consisting of a 17th century BC Nuraghe, a bastion of 4 corner towers plus a central one, and a village inhabited from the 13th to the 6th century BC developed around the Nuraghe. Walking through Nuragic today is like stepping into a 3-dimensional textbook of Nuragic architectural evolution, where you can trace the growth of the complex through successive building phases that span centuries. Nuragic di Barumini is a very complex Nuraghe, one of those which are called polylobate, that is, they have a series of wall curtains linking the different fencing towers of what is called the central mastio, the main tower of the monument. Standing in the central courtyard of this architectural marvel, surrounded by towers that seem to grow organically from the bedrock itself, you can almost hear the voices of the craftsmen who spent generations perfecting their art, each generation building upon the achievements of those who came before. The construction of a major Nuraghe was clearly a community effort that required not just skilled architects and masons, but also a sophisticated understanding of logistics, engineering, and long-term planning. These weren't structures that could be built in a season or even a few years. The complex Nuraghes represent decades or even centuries of sustained effort, proof of societies stable and prosperous enough to invest in projects whose benefits would be enjoyed by generations yet unborn. But perhaps most mysteriously of all, the Nuraghes seem to have been designed with astronomical alignments in mind. Many are oriented to capture the light of the rising sun at particular times of year, or to frame the movement of stars and planets in ways that suggest their builders possessed sophisticated knowledge of celestial mechanics. Standing in one of these ancient observatories as the sun sets over the Mediterranean, painting the stone walls gold and crimson, you feel connected not just to the people who built these monuments, but to the cosmic rhythms that governed their lives. The variety of Nuraghe types across Sardinia speaks to a civilization that valued both unity and diversity, communities that shared fundamental architectural principles while adapting them to local needs and preferences. Most Nuraghe are quite small, but a few are obviously fortresses, suggesting a society where most settlements were peaceful but prepared for conflict when necessary. As evening deepens and the first stars appear in the darkening sky above your ancient stone tower, you begin to understand that the Nuraghes represent something far more profound than military architecture or status symbols. They are expressions of a people's relationship with their landscape, with each other, and with forces greater than themselves. Each tower is a place where earth reaches toward heaven, where human skill and natural stone combine to create something that transcends both. The Nuragic builders understood that architecture is frozen music, that the way stones fit together can create harmonies that resonate through millennia. They knew that a well-built tower becomes a focal point, not just for defense, but for community identity, a place where generations can gather to mark the turning of seasons and the passage of time itself. Many Nuraghe show evidence of continued use and reuse after the Bronze Age, mostly during the Punic and Roman phases of the island's history. This continuity of use speaks to the enduring power of these structures to serve human needs, their ability to adapt to changing times while maintaining their essential character. As you prepare to leave this ancient tower, perhaps making your way carefully down the narrow spiral staircase one last time, you carry with you the profound sense of having touched something eternal. The Nuraghes of Sardinia are more than archaeological monuments. They are proof that human beings have always been capable of creating beauty that endures, of building not just for themselves, but for all the generations that would follow. Next, we'll explore the daily life of the people who built these magnificent towers, the communities that flourished in their shadows, and the beliefs that inspired such extraordinary architectural achievements. But tonight, let the mystery and majesty of the Nuraghes carry you into dreams where stone towers pierce star-filled skies, and ancient wisdom whispers on Mediterranean winds that have blown unchanged for 3,000 years. The morning sun climbs higher over the Sardinian hills, and as it does, the ancient landscape comes alive around you. Picture yourself walking through a thriving Nuragic village at the height of their civilization, around 1200 BCE. The air is filled with the sounds of daily life, the rhythmic hammering of bronze smiths at their anvils, the gentle lowing of cattle being led to pasture, children's laughter echoing between the circular stone houses, and the soft murmur of conversation as neighbors share the morning's first tasks. You're standing in what archaeologists believe was home to a community of up to 1,000 individuals at its peak. The circular huts around you are built with stone foundations and conical roofs made of wood and thatch, each one perfectly suited to the Mediterranean climate. These homes provided shelter for families and served as workshops for various crafts, such as pottery, weaving, and metalworking. The presence of numerous storage vessels, grinding stones, and animal bones tells the story of a mixed economy based on agriculture, pastoralism, and skilled craftsmanship. Walk closer to one of these ancient homes, and you begin to understand the sophisticated social organization that made Nuragic civilization possible. Each dwelling was designed not just for comfort, but for functionality, with specialized areas for different activities. Here, near the central hearth, where warmth and light dance together, women work at looms creating textiles whose patterns have been passed down through generations. The click of the shuttle and the soft rustle of wool create a meditative rhythm that seems to connect the present moment to timeless traditions. In another corner of the settlement, master craftsmen work with bronze, creating not just practical tools and weapons, but also the extraordinary small sculptures that have become the civilization's most distinctive artistic legacy. More than 500 bronze statuettes of this type have been discovered during archaeological excavations in Sardinia, mainly in places of worship like their holy wells and the so-called Megara temples, but also in villages and Nuraghes. These bronzetti, as they're called today, were probably created using the lost wax technique, a sophisticated process that speaks to the remarkable skill of Nuragic metalworkers. Watch as a bronze smith carefully shapes wax into the figure of a warrior, complete with the distinctive horned helmet and round shield that mark him as a defender of the community. The attention to detail is extraordinary. Every fold of the cloak, every ornament on the armor, every expression on the face is rendered with loving precision. These aren't mass-produced objects, but individual works of art, each one carrying the personal vision of its creator. The bronze figurines reveal a society far more complex than simple agricultural communities. Some Nuraghe bronzes clearly portray the figures of chief kings, recognizable by their wearing a cloak and carrying a staff with bosses. Also depicted are other classes, including miners, artisans, musicians, wrestlers, and many fighting men, which has led scholars to think of a warlike society. With precise military divisions, including archers and infantrymen. Different uniforms could belong to different cantons or communities, suggesting a sophisticated political organization that united the island while respecting local traditions. But perhaps most fascinating of all are the figurines that seem to capture moments of everyday life. Here's a woman carrying a water jar, her posture speaking of strength and grace, developed through years of daily labor. There's a musician with his hands positioned to play an instrument, his face lifted as if caught in the middle of a song. And scattered throughout are animals, bulls and rams, deer and wild boar, that remind us how closely these people lived with the natural world that sustained them. Religion had a strong role in Nuragic society, which has led scholars to the hypothesis that the Nuragic civilization was a theocracy. But if so, it was a theocracy unlike any we know from the historical record, one that seemed to honor the divine through reverence for the natural world rather than through domination over it. Central to their spiritual life was the worship of water, that most essential element of life in the Mediterranean climate. Come now to one of their most sacred places, a holy well that exemplifies the Nuragic genius for combining practical engineering with spiritual expression. The Nuragic Holy Well was a Sardinian Bronze Age structure for the worship of the waters. Scattered throughout the island, along with the giants' graves and the Megaron temples, they testify to the deep religiosity of the Nuragic populations. These temples were places of pilgrimage and ceremonies, gathering points where various Nuragic populations of the area came together at certain times of year. Descend the monumental staircase that leads down to the sacred chamber, your footsteps echoing softly in the perfectly engineered acoustics of this ancient temple. The architecture follows the same pattern as that of the Nuraghe, the main part consisting of a circular room with a tholos vault with a hole at the summit. A monumental staircase connects the entrance to this subterranean room, creating a journey from the world of everyday concerns to the realm of the sacred. At the bottom of the staircase, clear spring water bubbles up from deep within the earth, just as it has for thousands of years. The Nuragic people understood that water was the source of all life, the element that connected earth to sky through the endless cycle of evaporation and rain. Their holy wells were places where this cosmic process could be honored, and where communities could come together to acknowledge their dependence on forces greater than themselves. Though initially assigned to the 8th to 6th century BC due to their advanced building techniques, the holy wells most likely date to the earlier Bronze Age, when Sardinia had strong relationships with the Mycenaean kingdoms of Greece and Crete around the 14th to 13th century BC. This dating places them at the height of Nuragic Civilization, when the island was fully integrated into Mediterranean trade networks and cultural exchange. But the Nuragic people didn't just build temples, they created entire sacred landscapes where the natural and the constructed worked together in harmony. Many of their settlements were positioned to take advantage of natural springs, fertile valleys, and defensible heights, but always in ways that seemed to enhance rather than dominate the existing landscape. Their architecture grew from the earth like natural formations, using local stone and following contours that felt organic and eternal. The daily rhythm of Nuragic life was closely tied to the seasons and to the agricultural calendar that governed survival in the Mediterranean world. Spring brought the planting of wheat and barley, the birthing of lambs and calves, and the collection of wild herbs and plants that provided both food and medicine. Summer meant tending crops and flocks, working bronze in workshops that could take advantage of long daylight hours, and preparing for the great harvest festivals that brought communities together. Autumn was the time of gathering, not just of grain and olives, but of the community itself. This was when the great religious festivals took place at the holy wells, when bronze figurines were offered to the water spirits, and when young people from different settlements met and formed the partnerships that would knit the various communities into a coherent civilization. Winter brought different rhythms, the time for storytelling around hearth fires, for the patient work of weaving and bronze smithing that would continue through the short days, and for the contemplation that comes when the agricultural year has ended and the cycle is ready to begin again. Through all these seasons, the Nuragic people maintained their connection to the wider Mediterranean world through trade and cultural exchange. Their bronze work found its way to Etruscan tombs in central Italy, proof of the high regard in which their craftsmanship was held. Foreign pottery and other goods found in their settlements speak of ongoing relationships with civilizations across the sea. Yet for all their worldliness, they remained deeply rooted in their island home. Their art celebrates Sardinian animals and landscapes. Their architecture uses local stone and follows local contours, and their religious practices honor the specific sacred sites, springs, caves, hilltops, that gave their homeland its spiritual character. As evening approaches in this ancient settlement, you might join the community for their evening meal, sitting in circles around fires that have been carefully tended all day. The conversation flows easily, mixing practical concerns about tomorrow's work with stories that connect the present generation to all those who came before. Children listen wide-eyed to tales of heroic ancestors, while adults discuss the bronze work that's nearly ready for trade, the sheep that need to be moved to new pasture, and the ceremonies that will mark the next turn of the seasonal wheel. This was a civilization that understood balance between innovation and tradition, between individual expression and community harmony, between reverence for the past and openness to the future. Their bronze figurines capture this balance perfectly, honoring both the warriors who defended their communities and the craftsmen who built them, both the leaders who guided them and the ordinary people whose daily work sustained them all. Sleep comes naturally in such a place where human rhythms align with natural ones, where the work of the day leads seamlessly into the rest of the night, and where tomorrow holds the promise of continuing an ancient conversation between human creativity and the enduring beauty of the Mediterranean world. Rest now, and let your dreams be filled with the gentle sounds of bronze being shaped by skillful hands, water bubbling up from sacred springs, and voices raised in songs that celebrate the eternal connection between earth and sky, between the human and the divine. The first light of dawn breaks over the Mediterranean, painting the waters in shades of gold and rose that have inspired seafarers for millennia. Stand now on the ancient harbor of a Nuragic settlement around 1200 BCE and feel the salt spray on your face as bronze-prowed vessels prepare for another journey across the wine-dark sea. This is where we encounter another facet of Nuragic civilization, their mastery of both warfare and navigation. Their identity as both warriors and sailors in an age when the Mediterranean was the highway of the known world. The bronze figurines scattered across the ancient dock tell the story of a martial society, but one unlike any other in the ancient world. Here stands a warrior in his distinctive horned helmet, the curved projections not just decorative but functional, designed to deflect enemy blows and create a fearsome silhouette in battle. His round shield bears intricate patterns that speak of both craftsmanship and clan identity, while his bronze sword gleams with the particular luster that only the finest Sardinian metalworkers could achieve. Look closely at his armor, and you begin to understand the sophisticated military technology that made Nuragic warriors formidable throughout the Mediterranean. In Nuragic Sardinia, warrior ideals were woven into the production of iconic bronze statuettes and related warrior panoplies, all presented at central sanctuaries as ceremonial offerings. The bronze corselet that protects his torso is shaped to deflect blows while allowing freedom of movement, a perfect marriage of protection and practicality that speaks of centuries of battlefield experience. But these weren't just soldiers. They were citizen warriors, members of communities who took up arms to defend their island home and their trading interests across the sea. The variety of warrior types represented in the bronze figurines suggests a sophisticated military organization: archers with their distinctive curved bows, spearmen with long bronze-tipped lances, and heavy infantry equipped with the finest armor and weapons that Bronze Age technology could provide. Walk closer to the water's edge, where the boats themselves wait in the gentle swell of the morning tide. The Nuragic vessels were marvels of Bronze Age naval architecture, and we know their design intimately thanks to the remarkable bronze boat models that have been discovered in their sacred sites. New weapons, such as swords, daggers, and axes, preceded drills, pins, rings, bracelets, statuettes, and the votive boats that show a close relationship with the sea. These miniature vessels, offered as gifts to the gods, preserve every detail of Nuragic shipbuilding expertise. The boats themselves were sleek and purposeful, designed for both trade and warfare in the challenging waters of the Mediterranean. Their bronze figurine models show us vessels with high protective sides and distinctive curved prows that could cut through heavy seas. Some carry warriors with their shields and spears, while others seem designed purely for cargo, with ample space for the copper ingots, bronze tools, and other goods that formed the backbone of Mediterranean trade. Climb aboard one of these ancient vessels, feeling the solid oak planking beneath your feet and the gentle rock of a ship built for long voyages. The smell of tar and rope mingles with the salt air, while overhead, a square sail of woven wool catches the morning breeze. These ships were the lifelines of Nuragic civilization, connecting the island to trading networks that stretched from Spain to Cyprus, from the tin mines of Britain to the gold mines of Egypt. The Nuragic people were among the first to understand that in the Bronze Age, Mediterranean, power came not from controlling territory alone, but from controlling trade routes. Sardinia, a land rich in mines, notably copper and lead, saw the construction of numerous furnaces for the production of alloys, which were traded across the Mediterranean basin. Nuragic people became skilled metal workers. They were among the main metal producers in Europe. Their ships carried Sardinian copper to distant shores and returned with the tin needed to create bronze, the silver and gold that adorned their temples, and the exotic goods that marked their settlements as participants in a truly international economy. But this maritime prowess came at a price. The same ships that carried peaceful traders also carried warriors, and the same navigational skills that opened trade routes also enabled raids on enemy coasts. Some scholars believe that the Nuragic people were among the mysterious sea peoples who troubled the eastern Mediterranean in the late Bronze Age, those confederated tribes who launched raids against Egypt and the Hittite Empire before finally settling in various Mediterranean lands. The evidence for this connection is tantalizing but inconclusive. The Sheridan are previously mentioned in the records of Rameses II, who claimed to have defeated them in his second year, 1278 BC, when they attempted to raid Egypt's coast. The pharaoh subsequently incorporated many of them into his personal guard. The name Sheridan bears a striking resemblance to Sardinia, and the horned helmets worn by these sea raiders in Egyptian depictions match perfectly with the horned helmets shown in Nuragic bronze figurines. Whether or not the Sardinians were directly involved in the Sea People's raids, it's clear that they lived in a world where the line between trade and piracy was often thin. The same skills needed to navigate to distant markets were equally useful for launching surprise attacks on rival settlements. The same bronze weapons that protected merchant vessels could just as easily be used to capture them. The waters of the Mediterranean were the setting for navigation and combat, and the ports welcomed the peoples who came from the sea. Picture a Nuragic raiding party returning from a successful expedition, their bronze-reinforced prows cutting through the evening swell as they approach their home harbor. The warriors stand proudly in their distinctive armor, their round shields bearing the dents and scratches of recent combat. In the holds of their ships lie not just the spoils of war, but also evidence of their far-ranging maritime activities: pottery from Cyprus, amber from the Baltic, ivory from Africa, and perhaps even exotic spices from the mysterious lands beyond the Pillars of Hercules. The raid they've returned from might have targeted Egyptian grain ships or Mycenaean trading vessels, but it was also part of a larger pattern of Mediterranean politics where alliance and enmity shifted like the tides themselves. Today's enemy might be tomorrow's trading partner, and the warrior who fought you in the morning might offer you hospitality in the evening. Bound by the ancient codes of honor that governed Bronze Age warfare, but for all their martial prowess, the Nuragic people were not merely raiders or pirates. They were sophisticated naval architects who understood the importance of controlling sea lanes while maintaining the diplomatic relationships necessary for long-term prosperity. Their bronze figurines show not just warriors, but also the craftsmen who built their ships, the merchants who sailed them, and the priests who blessed their voyages and welcomed them home. The religious dimension of Nuragic seafaring was as important as the commercial and military aspects. Ships were blessed before departure at the sacred wells, where bronze boat models were offered to ensure safe passage. The return of a successful expedition was marked by ceremonies of thanksgiving, where part of the profits were dedicated to the gods who had granted fair winds and protected the voyagers from the many dangers of Bronze Age navigation. As evening falls over this ancient harbor, you might join the crews in their celebrations, sharing in the feast that marks another successful return from the wine-dark sea. The conversation flows like wine itself, mixing practical talk of winds and currents with stories of distant ports and exotic peoples, of storms weathered and battles won, of the endless interplay between human skill and the vast forces of nature that govern life on the Mediterranean. Listen to an old captain describing the approach to a Cyprian harbor, his weathered hand sketching the landmarks in the air as he speaks of mountains that rise from the sea like sleeping giants, of channels marked by ancient cairns, of the particular shade of blue that tells an experienced mariner he's approaching fresh water. Or hear a young warrior recount his first sea battle, the clash of bronze on bronze as ships grappled together in the morning mist, the moment when courage and training fuse into the controlled fury that wins fights and saves lives. These were not crude pirates or simple raiders, but members of a sophisticated maritime civilization that understood the delicate balance between war and peace, between taking and trading, that characterized the Bronze Age Mediterranean world. They were warriors when they had to be, traders when they could be, and always sailors who understood that their island home was not a prison, but a launching pad for adventures that would carry their influence to the furthest corners of the known world. The Nuragic legacy on the sea would endure long after their civilization itself had been absorbed into larger Mediterranean currents. Their shipbuilding techniques influenced later naval development throughout the region. Their understanding of sea lanes and seasonal winds became part of the accumulated wisdom of Mediterranean navigation, and their bronze weapons and armor designs spread far beyond their island home to influence military development across the ancient world. As you prepare to leave this ancient harbor, perhaps walking back toward the Nuraghe that dominates the settlement, you carry with you the sound of waves against bronze-reinforced hulls, the sight of warriors returning home under star-filled skies, and the understanding that the Nuragic people were far more than the builders of mysterious stone towers. They were masters of the sea itself, warriors and traders whose influence extended far beyond their island home to shape the destiny of the entire Bronze Age Mediterranean. Sleep now to the sound of gentle waves lapping against ancient quays, and dream of bronze-prowed ships sailing toward horizons that held both profit and peril, adventure and homecoming, in the endless cycle of departure and return that defined the lives of these remarkable seafaring warriors. The Mediterranean dawn reveals a different kind of encounter today, one that would change the course of Sardinian history forever. It is around 900 BCE, and on the horizon, you can see the distinctive silhouette of ships, unlike any that have visited these shores before. Their deep hulls and curved prows mark them as vessels built for long ocean voyages, and the purple-dyed sails that catch the morning breeze speak of wealth and sophistication that reaches far beyond the Mediterranean world the Nuragic people have known. These are Phoenician merchant ships, and their arrival marks the beginning of a cultural exchange that would transform both peoples in ways neither could have imagined. Stand now on the ancient shore near what would become the great trading post of Theros, and feel the salt spray mingle with anticipation as two civilizations prepare to meet for the first time. The Phoenicians came originally from what is now Lebanon and founded a vast trading network in the Mediterranean. Sardinia had a special position because it was central in the western Mediterranean between Carthage, Spain, the River Rhone, and the Etruscan civilization area. These master traders from the eastern Mediterranean had been exploring westward for generations, establishing colonies and trading posts wherever they found valuable resources or strategic harbors. In Sardinia, they found both. Watch as the lead vessel approaches the natural harbor with practiced skill, its crew calling out soundings and landmarks in their Semitic tongue. The Phoenicians aboard are not conquerors or raiders but merchants, their ships laden with goods from across the known world. Glass vessels that capture light like captured rainbows, ivory carvings from African elephants, silver jewelry worked with techniques unknown in the West, and most precious of all, knowledge of new technologies and ideas that would revolutionize Sardinian life. Archaeological evidence suggests they had an amicable relationship with the Nuragic people, and this peaceful first contact would set the tone for centuries of cultural exchange. Unlike many encounters between Bronze Age peoples, this meeting was characterized by mutual respect and recognition of shared benefits. The Phoenicians needed the metals that Sardinia could provide: copper, lead, and silver from the rich mines of the Iglesiente region. The Nuragic people, in turn, were eager to acquire the luxury goods and technological innovations that these sophisticated traders could offer. Step closer to the beach where Nuragic villagers are gathering to witness this historic moment. Among them stand the bronze smiths and metalworkers who will become the bridge between these two worlds. Their skills in working metal making them valuable partners in the trade relationships that are about to flourish. The mining area of the Iglesiante was important for the metals lead and zinc, resources that would prove crucial in the expanding Mediterranean economy. The first Phoenician settlement was established at Sant'Antioco around the mid-8th century BCE, followed soon after by trading posts at other natural harbors, such as Theros and Nora. These weren't military conquests, but commercial partnerships, settlements that grew organically from the mutual benefits of trade and cultural exchange. The majority of the inhabitants in these cities were of indigenous Nuragic stock, while the Phoenician element was, although culturally predominant, in minority. Walk now through one of these early settlements, perhaps the bustling port of Nora, where Phoenician architectural techniques are beginning to blend with traditional Nuragic building methods. Here, you can see houses built in the Phoenician style, but using local stone and adapted to Mediterranean weather patterns. The fusion is evident everywhere, in pottery that combines Nuragic forms with Phoenician decorative motifs, in bronze work that incorporates new techniques learned from Eastern craftsmen, and in religious practices that honor both local spirits and Phoenician deities. Cultural blending is evident in hybrid artifacts such as Santimbinia pottery, combining Nuragic and Phoenician styles, and tombs with Phoenician designs built using Nuragic construction techniques. These archaeological treasures tell the story of two peoples learning from each other, adapting and adopting techniques and ideas that served their needs while maintaining their essential cultural identities. The religious dimension of this cultural exchange was particularly fascinating. Phoenician merchants brought with them worship of deities like Melkart and Astarte, gods and goddesses associated with trade, fertility, and safe passage across dangerous seas. But rather than replacing Nuragic religious practices, these new deities were often incorporated into existing sacred sites, creating syncretic traditions that honored both cultures. Visit one of the sacred wells that was adapted for Phoenician religious practices, and you can still feel the profound spirituality that made such cultural fusion possible. The Nuragic reverence for water and natural springs aligned perfectly with Phoenician traditions of honoring gods and goddesses through offerings made at sacred sites. Bronze figurines in both Nuragic and Phoenician styles have been found together in these locations, evidence of shared ceremonies where both peoples could honor their respective deities in the same sacred space. As the decades passed and trade relationships deepened, the influence became truly mutual. Phoenician merchants adopted Nuragic metalworking techniques that proved superior to their own methods, while Nuragic craftsmen learned new ways of working with glass, precious metals, and exotic materials that had never before been available on the island. The result was an artistic flowering that enriched both cultures and created works of unprecedented beauty and sophistication. But this peaceful period of cultural exchange was not destined to last forever. Through mixed marriages and in fruitful and continuous cultural exchange, the two peoples coexisted peacefully, and the coastal villages became important urban centers, organized in a similar way to the ancient city-states of the Lebanese coasts. Yet even as this cooperation flourished, larger forces were stirring in the Mediterranean that would eventually transform the nature of Phoenician presence in Sardinia. By the mid-6th century BCE, a new power had emerged in North Africa. Carthage, the greatest of all Phoenician colonies, was extending its influence westward. The passage of Sardinia under Carthaginian rule further accentuated the phenomenon of integration between Sardis and Phoenicians, but it also marked a shift from peaceful trade partnership toward more direct political control. Feel the changing winds of Mediterranean politics as Carthaginian ships appear on the horizon, their hulls heavier with military equipment than their Phoenician predecessors. The Carthaginians were still technically Phoenicians, descendants of the same people who had established the first trading posts, but their approach to Sardinia would be more systematic and more controlling than the loose commercial partnerships of the earlier period. The Carthaginian period brought both benefits and challenges to Nuragic civilization. On one hand, it opened new trade routes and brought increased prosperity to those settlements that cooperated with the new regime. Sardinian metals and agricultural products found ready markets throughout the Carthaginian Empire, while luxury goods flowed back to the island in unprecedented quantities. On the other hand, Carthaginian control meant the end of the political independence that Nuragic communities had maintained during the Phoenician period. Local leaders found themselves answerable to Carthaginian governors. Local religious practices were increasingly influenced by Carthaginian customs, and the easy cultural exchange of the earlier period gave way to a more hierarchical relationship where Carthaginian interests took precedence. Yet even under Carthaginian rule, the fundamental resilience and adaptability of Nuragic culture continued to assert itself. The construction of Nuraghes had largely stopped by this period, with many abandoned or partially dismantled starting from 1150 BC. But the communities themselves evolved new forms of political organization. According to archaeologist Giovanni Liliu, the real breakthrough of that period was the political organization which revolved around the parliament of the village, composed by the heads and the most influential people, who gathered to discuss the most important issues. As evening falls over this ancient landscape, where Phoenician ships still ride at anchor in harbors that have seen centuries of cultural exchange, you might reflect on the profound changes that contact with these Eastern Mediterranean peoples brought to Sardinia. The Nuragic civilization was never the same after these encounters, but neither was it simply overwhelmed or absorbed. Instead, it adapted and evolved, incorporating new ideas and technologies while maintaining its essential character. The legacy of this encounter would extend far beyond the end of Nuragic civilization itself. The urban centers established during this period would become the foundation cities of Roman Sardinia. The artistic traditions that emerged from cultural fusion would influence Mediterranean art for centuries, and the agricultural and metallurgical techniques that were refined through this exchange would continue to serve the island's inhabitants for generations to come. Walk now along the ancient harbor where Phoenician and Nuragic vessels rest side by side, their rigging creaking gently in the evening breeze. The conversations you might overhear blend languages and concerns, merchants discussing the price of silver in distant markets, craftsmen sharing techniques for working with new materials, and families planning marriages that will unite Phoenician and Nuragic bloodlines in bonds that will endure for centuries. This was cultural exchange at its finest, not the domination of one people by another, but the creative fusion of different traditions into something richer and more complex than either could have achieved alone. The Phoenician-Nuragic synthesis that emerged from these centuries of contact created art, architecture, and ways of living that honored both traditions while pointing toward new possibilities for human community. Sleep now to the gentle sound of Mediterranean waves lapping against hulls that carry the hopes and dreams of two peoples learning to share one homeland, and let your dreams be filled with the patient work of cultural exchange, the slow magic by which strangers become neighbors and neighbors become family, in the endless human story of adaptation and renewal. The year is 238 BCE, and the winds of change are blowing across the Mediterranean with the force of an approaching storm. Stand now on the hills overlooking the ancient harbor of Corrales, where ships bearing the eagle standards of Rome ride at anchor alongside the familiar vessels of Carthaginian merchants. The great game of Mediterranean politics has shifted once again, and Sardinia finds itself at the center of forces that will reshape the entire ancient world. The transformation didn't happen overnight. For decades, the island had been caught between the growing power of Rome and the established authority of Carthage, two civilizations whose rivalry would eventually consume the Western Mediterranean in a series of devastating wars. The Nuragic people, who had adapted so successfully to Phoenician and Carthaginian influence, now faced their greatest challenge yet: incorporation into the expanding Roman Empire. The immediate cause of the change was Rome's victory in the First Punic War, that epic 23-year struggle that had raged from 264 to 241 BCE. When Carthage finally sued for peace, exhausted by decades of naval warfare and massive military expenditures, Rome demanded not just indemnities, but territorial concessions. While Carthage was occupied with the mercenary war, Rome broke the terms of a treaty made after the First Punic War and annexed Sardinia and Corsica by force. In 238 BC, the Carthaginians surrendered their claim to the islands, which together became a province of Rome. Walk through the streets of what had been Carthaginian settlements, and you can feel the profound uncertainty that must have gripped the inhabitants during this transition. The Phoenician and Carthaginian merchants who had built their lives around Mediterranean trade networks suddenly found themselves subjects of a power whose methods and priorities were fundamentally different from anything they had known. The Romans were not simply another trading people. They were conquerors who brought with them a systematic approach to administration that would transform every aspect of island life. But the Roman conquest was not simply a matter of changing flags and administrators. The Carthaginians, after a number of military campaigns, overcame the Sardinians and conquered coastal Sardinia, the Iglesiente with its mines in the southern plains. The Nuragic culture may have survived in the mountainous interior of the island. This geographical division would prove crucial in determining how different Sardinian communities experienced Roman rule. This dichotomy created a fragmented cultural landscape, with the Punic hegemony of the coastal cities coexisting with the enduring autonomy of Nuragic people in the mountainous hinterland. The Iglesiente mines operated under Carthaginian oversight, yet rural areas preserved traditional bronzeworking. These divisions persisted through the Roman conquest, 238 BCE, with Latin sources distinguishing coastal Sardi Punic from inland Sardi Politi tribes. Venture now into the mountainous interior, where Nuragic communities had maintained their independence even during the height of Carthaginian power, and you encounter a different story entirely. Here, the ancient towers still dominated the landscape, and traditional ways of life continued much as they had for centuries. The Roman legions that could march efficiently along coastal roads found the interior highlands a far more challenging environment, where every valley could conceal an ambush and every hilltop fortress could become a center of resistance. The Romans quickly learned that conquering Sardinia on paper was very different from controlling it in practice. The Nuragic Sardinians and Corsicans, however, often rebelled against the Roman rulers. A revolt broke out in 235 BC, but it was violently suppressed by Manlius Torquatus, who celebrated a triumph over the Sardinians. This pattern of rebellion and suppression would be repeated throughout the early centuries of Roman rule, as proud mountain communities refused to accept the loss of their ancient freedoms. Yet even as political control passed to Rome, the deeper currents of Sardinian culture continued to flow. The Greek geographer Strabo confirms the survival in the interior of the island of the ancient customs and the independence of the Sardinians. The Nuraghes might no longer be centers of political power, but they remained landmarks in a cultural landscape that Roman administration could modify but never completely erase. The changes that Roman rule brought were both subtle and profound. Latin gradually became the language of administration and commerce, though ancient Sardinian dialects persisted in isolated mountain communities. Roman architectural techniques influenced new construction, but the fundamental relationship between human settlements and the natural landscape remained essentially Nuragic. The sacred wells continued to be honored, though now they might also include shrines to Roman deities, alongside the ancient water spirits. Perhaps most significantly, the economic focus of the island began to shift under Roman administration. The province developed into a major source of grain and salt for the Roman Empire, but also exported wines, olives, and was also home to several mining operations. The Romans systematized what had been more informal trading relationships, creating large-scale agricultural operations designed to feed the growing population of Rome itself. Walk through one of the new Roman estates that were carved out of former Nuragic territories, and you can see how this transformation affected daily life. Where once extended families had worked small plots using traditional methods passed down through generations, now slave labor and systematic agricultural techniques produced crops for export to distant markets. The ancient rhythm of seasons and festivals gave way to the more regimented calendar of Roman agricultural administration. Yet even within this changing economic landscape, elements of Nuragic tradition persisted. The bronze-working skills that had made Sardinian craftsmen famous throughout the Mediterranean continued to flourish under Roman rule, though now they served different markets and produced different kinds of objects. The small bronze figurines that had been central to Nuragic religious practice evolved into decorative objects for Roman homes, carrying forward ancient artistic traditions in new forms. The religious transformation was perhaps the most complex aspect of the Roman period. The Romans, with their characteristic pragmatism, did not attempt to suppress local religious practices entirely. Instead, they encouraged syncretism, the blending of local deities with Roman ones. Sacred sites that had been honored for millennia continued to receive offerings, though now these might include Roman coins alongside traditional bronze figurines. Yet this religious flexibility could not disguise the fact that the spiritual heart of Nuragic civilization was gradually being transformed. The communal ceremonies that had brought scattered settlements together around sacred wells and seasonal festivals were replaced by more individualized forms of worship, centered on Roman temples and Roman festivals. The ancient connection between community identity and sacred landscape began to weaken as Roman administrative districts replaced tribal territories. As the centuries passed, this gradual transformation accelerated. The Nuragic civilization lasted from the 18th century BC, Middle Bronze Age, up to the Iron Age or until the Roman colonization in 238 BC. Others date the culture as lasting at least until the 2nd century CE. Even those scholars who see Nuragic culture as persisting into the Roman imperial period acknowledge that it was fundamentally changed by the encounter with Roman civilization. The Nuraghes themselves became symbols of this transformation. Many were abandoned as their communities dispersed or relocated to Roman-style settlements. Others were partially dismantled, their stones used to build Roman roads and buildings. A few were adapted for Roman use, becoming watchtowers or storage facilities in the expanding Roman infrastructure network. Yet they were never entirely forgotten. Even as Roman culture became dominant in the coastal cities and agricultural lowlands, the ancient towers remained prominent features of the landscape. Roman writers described them with curiosity and respect, recognizing that they represented an engineering tradition worthy of admiration, even if its creators were no longer politically independent. The people themselves adapted to Roman rule in different ways. Some embraced Roman citizenship and the opportunities it offered, becoming merchants, soldiers, or administrators in the expanding empire. Others retreated to the most remote mountain valleys, preserving as much as they could of ancient customs and languages. Most found some middle path, participating in Roman economic and political life while maintaining private connections to older traditions. As evening falls over this landscape in transition, where Roman roads now connect settlements that had once communicated through fire signals between Nuraghe towers, you might reflect on the complex legacy of conquest and adaptation. The Nuragic civilization, as an independent political entity, had indeed ended, but its cultural influence would continue to shape Sardinian life for centuries to come. The craftsmanship traditions that had produced the bronze figurines evolved into medieval and modern Sardinian metalwork. The architectural techniques used in Nuraghe construction influenced later Sardinian building styles. The agricultural practices developed over centuries of Mediterranean farming continued to sustain island communities long after Roman administrative systems had themselves collapsed. Even the resistance to outside control that characterized the mountain community's response to Roman rule would become a defining characteristic of Sardinian identity, manifesting again and again throughout the island's long history of foreign domination. The Romans conquered Sardinia, but they could never entirely subdue the independent spirit that the Nuragic people had cultivated over more than a millennium of autonomous development. Sleep now in this ancient landscape, where Roman milestones mark roads that follow paths first worn by Nuragic shepherds, where the sound of Latin prayers mingles with older invocations in forgotten tongues, and where the cycle of seasons continues unchanged despite all the political transformations that have swept across the island. Dream of continuity within change, of traditions that adapt without losing their essential character, and of the quiet persistence of local wisdom in the face of imperial power. The morning light filters through the branches of an ancient olive tree, one whose gnarled roots may have drawn sustenance from soil that once nourished Nuragic gardens. We have traveled far through time together, from the bronze workshops of 3 millennia ago to the Roman conquest that formally ended the Nuragic age. But here, in this gentle morning light, you begin to understand that endings and beginnings are rarely as definitive as historians would have us believe. Stand quietly in this Sardinian landscape and listen. Beneath the modern sounds of the countryside, you can still hear echoes of the ancient world, the rhythm of traditional craftsmanship that still shapes wool and metal, with techniques passed down through centuries, the cadence of folk songs that carry melodies older than memory, and the whispered wisdom of people who never forgot that they were the inheritors of something remarkable and precious. The Nuragic civilization may have lost its political independence, but its soul persisted in ways that would shape Sardinian identity for all the centuries that followed. In the mountain villages where Roman authority never fully penetrated, in the sacred springs that continued to be honored regardless of changing governments, and most importantly, in the hands and hearts of craftspeople who maintained their ancient relationship with the materials and techniques that had made their ancestors renowned throughout the Mediterranean world. Walk through one of these traditional workshops that still dot the Sardinian landscape, and you encounter living archaeology. Here, artisans continue to work with regional materials like cork, sheep's wool, silver, coral, and chestnut wood, creating objects that would have been recognizable to their Nuragic predecessors even as they serve contemporary needs. Sardinian craftsmanship has evolved over the centuries, while its cultural importance has been handed down from generation to generation, creating an unbroken chain that connects the Bronze Age to the present moment. Watch as a modern metalworker shapes silver with tools and techniques that echo the bronze smithing traditions of 3,000 years ago. The precision required, the understanding of how heat affects metal, the patient hammering that gradually transforms raw material into useful beauty. These fundamentals remain unchanged even as the specific objects being created have evolved to serve contemporary life. The hands moving across the metal carry muscle memory that reaches back through generations to the workshops where Nuragic craftsmen created the bronze figurines that still astonish us today. During the 20th century, different ideological constructions appear intertwined and informed crafts production, collection, and musealization as modern Sardinia sought to understand and preserve its ancient heritage. But the deeper current of traditional making never needed preservation because it never truly disappeared. It simply adapted, as living traditions always do, finding new expressions while maintaining its essential character. The connection between ancient and modern becomes even clearer when you consider the profound relationship with the natural world that characterizes both Nuragic artifacts and contemporary Sardinian craft traditions. The Bronze Age Sardinians who positioned their sacred wells to honor natural springs were expressing the same reverence for the island's landscape that modern artisans show when they choose to work exclusively with materials that grow from Sardinian soil or emerge from Sardinian waters. This isn't nostalgia or romantic reconstruction. It's the continuation of a philosophical approach to life that sees human creativity as part of a larger conversation with the natural world. Just as the Nuragic builders used local stone and followed natural contours in their architecture, contemporary Sardinian craftspeople work with cork oak and wild herbs, sea coral, and mountain minerals, creating objects that speak of place in ways that mass production never could. the traditional festivals that still mark the Sardinian calendar carry forward this same integration of human community with natural cycles. When modern Sardinians gather to celebrate seasonal transitions, they're participating in celebrations that have their roots in Bronze Age agricultural ceremonies. The specific forms have evolved, but the underlying understanding remains constant. Human communities thrive when they align themselves with the rhythms that govern all life on Earth. Luxia is a female mythical character in the Sardinian narrative tradition who is linked to the most varied arguments, although her presence is felt most strongly in stories that connect contemporary listeners with ancient wisdom. These folk traditions serve as bridges between worlds, carrying forward insights and understandings that formal history often overlooks. The sacred wells themselves continue to inspire reverence among modern Sardinians, even those who may not explicitly connect their feelings to ancient religious practices. The sacred well of Satesta is one of the best-known places of worship in Nuragic Sardinia, dating to the final Bronze Age, 12th–11th century BC, yet it remains a place of pilgrimage for people seeking connection with something larger than themselves. What draws modern visitors to these ancient sites isn't just historical curiosity, but the same sense of the sacred that drew their Bronze Age predecessors. The clear water that bubbles up from deep springs carries the same life-giving power it always has, and the acoustic properties of the stone chambers create the same sense of being in a liminal space between ordinary consciousness and something deeper and more mysterious. The Nuraghe themselves have become symbols not just of ancient engineering prowess, but of a distinctive Sardinian approach to living in the world. Their builders understood that true architecture grows from landscape rather than being imposed upon it, that communities flourish when they create gathering places that honor both human needs and natural beauty, and that the most enduring structures are those that serve multiple generations with grace and flexibility. These insights echo through contemporary Sardinian life in subtle but significant ways. Modern architecture in Sardinia often reflects the region's architectural heritage and natural landscape, creating buildings that feel continuous with both the ancient stone towers and the Mediterranean environment they inhabit. This isn't mere stylistic borrowing, but the expression of an enduring design philosophy that values harmony over domination, integration over isolation. The philosophical legacy of the Nuragic civilization extends beyond craft traditions and architectural principles to encompass a distinctive approach to community organization and social responsibility. The Bronze Age settlements that grew around the Nuraghe were characterized by cooperative decision-making and shared investment in long-term projects that would benefit many generations. These values persist in contemporary Sardinian communities, where neighbors still gather to discuss common concerns and work together on projects that serve the collective good. Perhaps most importantly, the Nuragic legacy can be seen in the island's continued resistance to cultural homogenization. Just as the Bronze Age Sardinians maintained their distinctive identity while participating actively in Mediterranean-wide trade networks, modern Sardinians have found ways to engage with global culture while preserving the particular character that makes their island home unique. This isn't the product of conscious historical preservation, but the natural expression of cultural patterns that have proven their worth over millennia. The same qualities that allowed Nuragic communities to flourish for 1,000 years: adaptive creativity, respect for natural limits, strong local identity combined with openness to beneficial exchange, continue to serve contemporary Sardinian communities as they navigate the challenges of modern life. As evening approaches in this landscape where ancient and modern interpenetrate so naturally, You might reflect on what the Nuragic legacy offers to all of us who seek to create sustainable, meaningful communities in an increasingly complex world. Their example suggests that true progress comes not from abandoning the past, but from building upon its wisdom, not from conquering nature, but from learning to live as part of its larger patterns. The bronze figurines that survive from their civilization aren't just archaeological artifacts, but reminders of the human impulse to create beauty even in the most practical objects, to honor both individual skill and community values, to celebrate both strength and gentleness as essential human qualities. These same impulses drive contemporary Sardinian artisans who continue to create objects that serve daily life while lifting the spirit. The sacred wells continue to bubble with the same clear water that nourished Bronze Age ceremonies, reminding us that some sources of life remain constant even as everything else changes. The Nuraghe still stand sentinel over landscapes that have seen empires rise and fall, proof that human beings can create things that endure when they build with wisdom, patience, and deep respect for the places they call home. As you prepare to leave this ancient landscape that has become a living museum of human possibility, carry with you the understanding that the past isn't something that happened long ago, but something that continues to happen moment by moment in the choices we make about how to live, how to work, how to honor the places and people we love. Sleep now with the quiet confidence that comes from knowing that human wisdom, once discovered, never truly disappears, but finds new expressions in each generation that has the patience to listen, the humility to learn, and the creativity to adapt ancient insights to contemporary needs. Dream of bronze being shaped by loving hands, of clear water flowing from sacred springs, of communities that flourish because they remember both where they came from and where they're going. In the endless human story of discovery and renewal, the journey draws to its close as the Mediterranean moon rises over the ancient landscape, casting silver light across the Sardinian hills where we began our exploration so long ago. More than 7,000 Nuraghes dot the Sardinian landscape, their silhouettes now etched against the star-filled sky like monuments to human aspiration itself. Stand quietly in this moonlit world and feel the profound peace that comes from having traveled the full circle of a story. From Bronze Age beginnings to the eternal present where all stories ultimately converge. The moon above you has witnessed everything we have shared together. The first experimental fusions of copper and tin in those distant workshops. The rising of the great stone towers that still punctuate the horizon. The bronze figurines being offered at sacred springs. The arrival of Phoenician ships with their purple sails. The transformation of Carthaginian rule. And the gradual absorption of Nuragic independence into the larger currents of Roman history. Yet through all these changes, the moon has remained constant, and so has something essential about this island home that made such remarkable human flowering possible. The moonlight transforms the landscape into something that belongs as much to dream as to waking life. In this gentle illumination, the boundaries between past and present become permeable, and you might almost expect to see the glow of bronze working fires in the valleys below, or the silhouette of a horned warrior walking the ancient pathways between settlements, or the wake of a midnight fishing boat whose design has remained unchanged for 3 millennia. The Nuraghe, in their long life and monumental persistence, become almost one thing with the natural aspects of the landscape, and this unity is never more apparent than under the moon's transforming light. These aren't just archaeological monuments, but living presences in a landscape that continues to nurture human dreams and human possibilities. They stand as proof that human beings can create things of lasting beauty when they work in harmony with the natural world rather than in opposition to it. Walk now along a path that might have been worn smooth by Nuragic shepherds, feeling the cool night breeze that carries the scent of wild herbs and sea salt, the eternal perfumes of the Mediterranean world. Each step connects you not just to the specific history we've explored together, but to the larger human story of which that history forms one remarkable chapter. The lessons of the Nuragic civilization become clearer in this quiet moonlight. They remind us that true civilization isn't measured by the conquest of neighbors or the accumulation of wealth, but by the creation of communities where human creativity can flourish across generations. They show us that the most enduring architecture grows from careful attention to landscape and climate, that the most beautiful art emerges from the patient mastery of materials and techniques, and that the strongest societies are those that balance innovation with respect for traditional wisdom. Their bronze figurines, scattered now in museums around the world, captured something essential about the human spirit: our capacity for both strength and gentleness, for both individual expression and community solidarity, for both practical skill and transcendent aspiration. In their small bronze faces, we see reflected our own hopes for what human life might become when it's lived with courage, creativity, and deep respect for the sacred dimensions of existence. The sacred wells continue to bubble with clear water under tonight's moon, just as they did during the ceremonies we witnessed together in imagination. From the countless Nuraghe to the giants and the sacred wells, Sardinia is full of megalithic mysteries that still have to be uncovered. But perhaps the deepest mystery isn't what we don't yet understand about these ancient sites, but what they continue to teach us about possibilities we've forgotten in our contemporary world. They remind us that human settlements can be designed to enhance rather than dominate the landscapes they inhabit. That communities can make decisions based on their effects 7 generations into the future. That religious life can celebrate the sacred in everyday experience rather than separating it into special times and places. These aren't utopian fantasies, but practical achievements that sustained a remarkable civilization for more than 1,000 years. The waves still break against Sardinian shores with the same rhythm that lulled Bronze Age fishing crews to sleep in their harbors. The stars that guided their navigation still wheel overhead in the same eternal patterns. The seasonal cycles that governed their agricultural calendar still bring spring rains and summer abundance, autumn harvest, and winter contemplation to those who know how to read the subtle signs of natural change. This continuity offers us something precious in our era of rapid change and technological disruption: the understanding that beneath all the surface turbulence of human affairs, deeper rhythms persist that can anchor and guide us if we remember how to pay attention to them. The Nuragic people lived successfully for centuries because they aligned their communities with these deeper rhythms, because they built with patience and maintained connections to sources of wisdom that transcend individual lifetimes. As you prepare to leave this moonlit landscape, carrying with you all that we've discovered together, take a moment to feel your own connection to the long chain of human creativity and adaptation that stretches from the Bronze Age to this present moment. You are part of that same story, a participant in the same eternal human project of creating meaningful communities, beautiful objects, and sustainable relationships with the natural world that sustains us all. The Nuragic Civilization, ended as a political entity, but its deeper contributions to human possibility continue to ripple through time. Every time we choose cooperation over conquest, beauty over mere utility, long-term sustainability over short-term gain, we continue their work. Every time we create something designed to serve not just ourselves but future generations, we honor their memory and extend their legacy. The Nuraghis themselves will outlast all of us. These monuments to human aspiration built so solidly that they've already survived 3 times longer than any modern nation-state. They stand as proof that human beings can indeed create things of lasting value when we combine technical skill with deep wisdom, individual creativity with community commitment, and practical intelligence with reverence for the mysterious forces that ultimately govern all life. Sleep now, dear traveler, in the knowledge that you have witnessed something rare and precious, the entire story of a human community that flourished because it learned to balance all the competing demands of civilized life with exceptional grace and wisdom. Let the moonlight on ancient stones carry you into dreams where you too might walk among bronze smiths and architects, sailors and shepherds, warriors and priests who understood that the purpose of human community is not to dominate the world, but to participate creatively and reverently in the larger patterns of existence that connect all things. The Mediterranean moon continues its eternal journey across star-filled skies that have blessed and witnessed every human dream, every human aspiration, every human achievement across the millennia. Under its gentle light, the story of the Nuragic Civilization becomes part of your own story, and your own dreams become part of the continuing human adventure that began in those first bronze workshops and continues wherever people gather to create communities worthy of the beautiful and mysterious world that is our common home. Dream well and dream long in the endless moonlit night where past and future dance together and all stories become one story, the eternal human story of learning to live with wisdom and beauty on this remarkable island Earth, floating in the vast cosmic sea. The ancient wisdom whispers on, carried by Mediterranean winds that know no boundaries of time, blessing all who have the patience to listen and the courage to dream of what human communities might yet become. The Mediterranean waves continue their eternal rhythm against the Sardinian shore, just as they have for millions of years, just as they will long after our own brief stories have joined the vast tapestry of human memory. The moon has completed its journey across the star-filled sky, and dawn approaches with its promise of new beginnings, even as our ancient journey draws to its gentle close. You have traveled far tonight, dear companion of these midnight hours. From the bronze workshops of 1800 BCE to the moonlit landscape of the present moment, you have witnessed the rise and transformation of one of humanity's most remarkable civilizations. You have stood in sacred wells where clear water still bubbles from the earth's depths, climbed spiral staircases in towers that have weathered 3 millennia of Mediterranean storms, and listened to the whispered wisdom of people who understood that true civilization is measured not by conquest, but by the beauty and sustainability of what we create together. The Nuragic people built their towers to last, and last they have. But more than that, they built a way of living that honored both human creativity and natural wisdom, that balanced individual expression with community solidarity, that embraced innovation while respecting ancient knowledge. These lessons ripple forward through time, available to anyone who has the patience to listen and the wisdom to learn from the long perspective of history. As you settle deeper into your comfortable resting place, allow yourself to carry forward something precious from this journey. Perhaps it's the understanding that human communities can thrive for centuries when they align themselves with natural rhythms rather than fighting against them. Perhaps it's the vision of craftspeople whose work honored both practical necessity and transcendent beauty. Perhaps it's simply the peace that comes from knowing that human wisdom, once discovered, never truly disappears, but finds new expressions in each generation that remains open to its guidance. The bronze figurines that survive from their civilization continue to inspire wonder in museums around the world. Their small faces still radiating the dignity and strength that characterize the people who created them. The sacred wells continue to offer their gift of clear water to anyone who approaches with reverence. The Nuraghes continue to stand sentinel over landscapes that have nurtured human dreams for millennia, proof that some human achievements transcend the rise and fall of empires. Tomorrow will bring its own challenges and opportunities, its own chances to choose between wisdom and folly, between cooperation and conflict, between building for the present moment or building for the generations yet to come. But tonight, you rest in the knowledge that humans have faced such choices before, and sometimes, wonderfully, have chosen well. This has been your journey through the entire story of the Nuragic Civilization, shared here in the quiet hours when the everyday world steps back and ancient wisdom becomes accessible once again. Thank you for traveling this path with me, for bringing your own dreams and hopes to the eternal conversation between past and future that makes all storytelling possible. I'm your guide from Mystic Bedtime Stories, and I'll be here whenever you're ready to explore another chapter in the great human story, another pathway through the rich landscape of our shared heritage. Until then, may your dreams be filled with bronze light and sacred waters, with the sound of ancient craftspeople at their work and the sight of stone towers reaching toward star-filled skies. Sleep deeply, dream beautifully, and remember that you are part of the same remarkable human story that began in those Bronze Age workshops and continues wherever people gather to create communities worthy of the magnificent world that is our common home. The Mediterranean waves whisper their eternal lullaby, the Sardinian moon blesses your rest, and the ancient wisdom that has guided human communities for millennia surrounds you with its gentle protection. Until we meet again in another story, in another time, rest well in the knowledge that the best of human achievement is always available to inspire and guide us, eternal as moonlight on ancient stones. Good night, dear traveler. Good night and sweet dreams.